Hello, this is Karen Johnson with another version of our Proctors History Project. We are taping people who've been engaged with Proctors over the years so that the history of the theater may be maintained. Today is December 16th, 2016, and we're very pleased to have with us today Michael Burns from MopCo, who has had many exciting relationships with Proctors.
That's the truth. Yes, indeed.
And I think maybe we should start out talking about what is MopCo and what do you do?
Sure. Great. Well, MopCo is a company, an LLC, that contains sort of two parts. One, a lot of people locally know the Mop and Bucket Company is our improvisational theater company that truthfully exists today because of Proctors, and we'll get to that. So we do performance improv, and we teach classes in improv to adults and kids, and all things improvisational. The other half is Coppet, which is my wife, Kat Coppet's last name, and that's an organizational training and development company. We have clients locally, MVP and Ellis Hospital are a couple that come to mind. And then Apple, Facebook, a company called Prezi over in Europe. So it's kind of an international consulting firm right here in Schenectady that's very small in terms of number of employees, but has a very large reach. And it in the Coppet half of the business, we use many of the same skills as we do in the improvisational performance part of the business. There's a lot of overlap there.
So you're, I don't think most people are aware that you have such an extensive consulting business.
I think locally it's kind of a secret, and that's why I'm grateful for opportunities like this to let people know that. And we are looking at kind of expanding our local client base, so this is a great opportunity for us. Yeah, Kat is sort of a thought leader in the area of, it's kind of good that she's not here, because I can just praise her.
Yes.
It's great. She really is.
She'll never know about
That's
it.
right. It's just between you and me, right? But she's a thought leader in use of improvisation in the corporate training and organizational development world. She wrote a book a few years back that's kind of a sort of a Bible in that area. A lot of people use it. So she's a pretty dynamic person, and we've built a nice company around that skill set of hers.
So how long has this company been in business?
In its present form, we've been in business about 8 years now. Kat came to the area about 10 years ago. And this is where Proctors starts to come into this, because I can't say it often enough that Proctors is very largely responsible for much of our success in both halves, really, of the business. Kat came to the area and was looking for improv, and at that point I was kind of the only game in town. I had just restarted this thing called the Mop and Bucket Company, and I restarted it accidentally. I got a call from the Wood Theater up in Glens Falls. I had put the Mop and Bucket Company to sleep for a while. I wrote a little book and did some other things for a couple of years. And they called me and said, "Hey, would you do a benefit for the Wood?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'd love to do that." And I hung up the phone. I said, "I don't have a company." What did I just do? So I scurried around and I'm calling people. And back then, this is a number of years ago, improv was not as well known in the Capital Region at all. There weren't many trained improvisers by any means. I managed to get a few people together, one of whom was this newcomer to the area named Kat Coppet, who had actually worked in San Francisco in a major improv theater called BATS, Bay Area Theater Sports, and before that in New York Theater Sports, and knew a lot more about improv than I did. And she's this newbie who says, "Yeah, I'll help out." And that was the beginning of this collaboration of ours, which of course some years later led to a marriage where we collaborate personally and professionally. So very early on, it became clear that it would make sense to take these two companies, the organizational development and the performance company, make one business entity. Another decision that was made was not to go not-for-profit and nonprofit. We just said, okay, we're biting the bullet. We're going to be a for-profit theater company, which people say is crazy.
That's quite brave.
It's crazy. but you know, there's not as much grant funding as there used to be. There's a lot of reasons to just skip all that paperwork and just do it, right? So we put the two businesses together. The part that I think that is important is we managed to get a meeting with this guy named Philip Morris. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
One of the things, Philip Morris came, and he's very entrepreneurial in the arts,
Yes.
and he also has used Proctors to facilitate engagement of many, many arts groups.
Yes.
And you got to be one of them.
We did.
So what did Philip give you? He gives you a little lift up. So
Yes. Oh,
what
boy,
did he
doesn't
do?
Well, we met with him upstairs at the old 440 State Building, and he said, okay, what do you guys want to do? And we launched into, and this is what's beautiful, as I tell you what we told him then, and then I look now at what we do. It describes it very well. We said we want to develop kind of a major regional improvisational theater company that has a full slate of classes, that has regular performances, that has a real professional air, and really runs an improv school, and is known as sort of the go-to place for improv in the whole region. And Philip, as you know, will listen very sort of gravely and nod and so forth. And he asked a very Philip Morris question. He said, so what's stopping you? Now, if I had been left to my own devices, the meeting would have just been not so useful, because I would have had a litany of, oh, it's so hard, and pity me, and so there's so many things, and so forth, which knowing Philip now in retrospect, would not have impressed him. Fortunately, my partner is brilliant, and she said, nothing. We just wondered if you wanted a piece of the action.
Changing things up a little.
Yes, which I think delighted Philip, perhaps. So he ended up saying, well, let's get these guys a place to rehearse and a place to perform. And he took us in, basically. Prior to that, as is the case with many improv companies, we were sort of the lost tribe. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd rehearse in a church basement and we'd get a gig someplace. I once did a garden center opening for a Walmart, which is perhaps the lowest point in my show business career.
How did it go?
Oh my goodness. There were wheelbarrows going back and forth through the stage performance area. Birds, you know, the way they will go
Was
into a
anyone
garden
paying
center.
attention to
None
you?
whatsoever.
Well, I guess you're lucky if they paid you.
Yeah, well, they didn't. It was one of those events for exposure. And as I have since learned,
which is
people,
everyone is giving you that opportunity.
yes, and you know, people die of exposure, so.
They like to eat too.
They do. Oddly enough, artists like to eat just as much as plumbers do. You know?
So then Philip made it possible for you to have a regular
Yeah.
performance venue
Yes.
in the underground at Proctors,
Right.
which
Yeah,
is
at first
otherwise
at the old
known
building.
as the basement.
That's right. And
Oh, you were in 440?
we were in
also?
440, and then you know that building had to go the way of all things. And then here's the thing: the 440 Black Box Theater was great. Philip and Dan Sheehan really took care of us when that needed to go. To find another place in this building that is so full of activities and groups and things going on, they wedged us into that basement space, and they also found a rehearsal space for us up in this loft upstairs in the Key Hall building. Mm-hmm. Took a little elbow grease, but that's okay, we have that. But they took care of our needs because they had, I think what is one of the many things that's great about Proctors is if they make a commitment to somebody, they stick with it, right? Unless you mess it up, they'll stick with you, you know?
Yes.
And we were able to develop this sort of small but loyal audience base. You know, I mean, when you're working in a basement, there's expectations, right? It's
Lower, you mean?
lower, literally and
Okay.
figuratively lower. But it was great to have that stability and that ongoing relationship because, to be perfectly honest, when we got here, we weren't all that great. like any other art form, it takes time to develop performers and develop an ensemble. But we were able to steadily improve over the years, and that would not be the case if it weren't for Proctors. There's no question about it.
So about how many people are working with you, and what's kind of the arrangement? Are some regulars and some come in?
Well, right now, MopCo LLC, Kat and I are employees for, various practical reasons. We are salaried employees. And we have 4 other employees, 3 of whom are improvisers with the company. So one of the things that we wanted to make good on is commitment to professionalism and really making local work happen. So there's roughly, and we have a part-time employee, our musical director. So of the acting company, of the Mop and Bucket company, there's roughly a dozen at any given time, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are either full or part-time employees. The rest are contractors. They'll come in and we pay a pittance for a local Friday or Saturday night show, and somewhat more if we have
They probably love it.
Oh yeah. And then if we have a private party or a corporate gig or something, we pay a bit more than that. So we try very hard to keep it as professional as possible. Many of our performers obviously have day jobs. This is a couple of them work here at Proctors, but they're in it for love. One of the things about the word amateur is that it has a sort of a bad name in the arts community. But as I'm sure you know, it means for the love of, right? That's sort of the root. So I have some really, really dedicated people, whether they're employees of the company or not, who come together, and we've been working together for years, and we really are sort of a real ensemble.
Right, and I'm sure in improv, doing things with each other, you grow as a group tremendously.
Yes, and my guys being whatever gender, they've gone and trained elsewhere. There's a real thirst for learning. So then somebody will go to New York, or I went to Boston a few years ago, and then we bring new things in and teach each other. So the level of work keeps rising. This week some of us were in the Bay Area in California. We just did a performance for a team that Kat works with at Facebook. We had a very sort of loosely associated improviser with us that we've worked with before but isn't part of that core group. 4 of us from the core group, and then an accompanist from San Francisco. And the beauty of it is, once you get to be pretty good at improv, we were all able to sort of mesh very well because we speak the same language, So
You got to look into this a little more. Well, Philip is very interested in the creative economy.
Yes.
The fact that we have under-recognized the impact of the arts financially on salaries of people and spending. And so you are part of that community, obviously, and I'm sure that's one reason he was motivated. Plus, he just loves almost everything
He's a
theatrical.
I think he's a very curious guy, right? He says, what happens if we back this? What'll this develop into, right? And that's a great thing, because so often people have a closed idea of what is possible and not possible, will work, won't work. And in terms of the creative economy, we're certainly part of it. Boy, are we part of it now.
And you've graduated from Proctor's
Yes, we have.
basement, and so tell us about that.
And that's very exciting, and a little bit scary, but really exciting. So I had been looking for a long time. The real dream that we laid out to Philip 10 years ago was to have our own theater where we did all these things, developed a school of improv and ran the consultancy and did the performances. Well, we have it now. I found a building in Little Italy on North J Street that had been vacant for 20 years. It used to be a firehouse that's at 10 North J, and then it was a restaurant and a few other things, and then it was just vacant. So it was in pretty rough shape on the inside, but I was able to get the owner to agree to a good purchase price. We closed in May and immediately lined up the dumpsters and went to
Filled
town
them up.
and filled them up, and boy did we ever. And we put about $500,000 into the place, including the purchase price. And we now have a 60 to 70 seat black box theater downstairs and a combination office and training facility upstairs. So both halves of our business now have a home, full and part-time employees. We're here. And we are very much part of the creative economy in the capital region. And I think that's exactly what Philip has done in so many directions, and not just Philip, right? I mean, you're part of this effort, and the guys at Metroplex are part of this effort, and so forth.
Well, everyone should claim it, because that's really what it took. It's everybody finally rowing in the same direction.
That's right. And you know, I've been in the area for, I got here as a young actor who was dismayed to find that the red carpet wasn't quite as ready to be rolled out for me in New York City as I had expected. So after a few years of that, I ended up living in Saratoga for a long time. And I have adult children. When they were young, I used to bring them to the cheap movies at Proctors. And it was sort of a military operation, you know. Pull the car up to the front of the theater, get the kids in, move the car, and then at the end of the movie, repeat the procedure and get out of town, right? Now Schenectady is this beautiful, vibrant, attractive place where you don't have to think that way. And I think that word is starting to spread. But it all centered right here.
So now you're on your own in this building. How do you find out when your shows are?
We have, thank you, what a great question. You're so nice.
Listen, I can sit here and talk to you all I want, but we got to know, how can we check
What
you
are the
out?
deets here? Yeah, let's get down to business. So we have a website, MopCo.org. The org is a hangover from a brief time when I was thinking of going nonprofit. Or as Kat likes to joke, well, we're artists. We don't want to deal with commerce, but we do, see. MopCo.org, and we post there all our upcoming events and classes and shows and so forth. Or somebody can shoot an email to hey, H-E-Y, at MopCo.org, and we'll get back to you. Hey, just hey at MopCo.org is kind of our general, hey. It's kind of our general inquiries email. And there are other email addresses as well. But, you know, that's a good place to start. We are usually listed in the various calendars. The alt is just getting started, and we're starting to give them information about what we're doing and where we'll be. So we try, and of course OSM, we're trying to get the word out anywhere we can.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's the name of the game, isn't it?
That is the name of the game.
Let everyone know what you're doing, and I think as we think about how Proctors has grown and prospered, you've been part of that.
Oh, very much so.
And you've been part of it as someone who Proctors helped, but also who helped Proctors.
Well, I love to think of that.
And I think, you know, that's kind of where we are with this theater right at this present time.
Right.
And it's a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, yes. And you know, it even spreads beyond, when we talk about the creative economy, another conscious decision that Kat and I made, and some people frankly said, you're nuts. We also bought a home in the city of Schenectady, and we did that quite deliberately, because Schenectady has been, I'm a Binghamton boy, so I know the problem that all these upstate cities face. And it's very similar whether you're talking about Binghamton or Utica or Schenectady, etc. We thought it was important to put our money where our mouth was and go all in, right? Pay taxes to the city, have our home here, work to make it better. Because so many people like to trash talk things. And something that Philip is constantly, and by the way, you, who before I ever knew you, I followed you in the Gazette and liked your style, to stay positive and to put out the good stuff, right? And to work for solutions instead of just, decry the problems and moan and wail. That gets old fast.
We've convinced one of our assemblymen that in Schenectady, when we have a problem, we try and solve it. Whereas in Albany, they have a problem and they try and figure out how to get the state to give them money. And it takes so long, you know, it's just not good. But we know we're not getting the money, though lately we have gotten
There's been
more.
more money coming down the pike lately.
We've been doing a lot better, and I think people are seeing our success.
Yeah. And by the way, I think it's important for me to acknowledge, we got some help from Metroplex for the project that we did. And that's an amazing boon to so much around here, right? Where you just, you dedicate this pot of money to let's develop this thing, let's make it happen. There's an attitude in Schenectady of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and let's get it back on the road that I think is just wonderful. And it's an exciting place to live. It really is.
It is.
You see the rebirth happening just since, since we moved into the underground, and now, when we moved in, it was construction up and down State Street, and it was kind of messy, but it was also very exciting. Now, it's so attractive and exciting to kind of be around downtown Schenectady. And I'm delighted to discover, I didn't know that was there. There are new things popping up all the time.
And you see people on the streets so much more than you used to, and more diverse people.
Much more diverse. It's a really, it's starting to feel like a cosmopolitan city, as it once was, and is obviously becoming again. So that's great.
Well, I want to thank you so much for chatting with us today. This is Michael Burns from MopCo, and today is December 16th, 2016. And we want to thank you so much for your participation in Schenectady and also being on our show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.